Hello and welcome, I'm Raziel, and so, probably to no one's surprise, I collect rulebooks. Now, I'm talking about rulebooks here, not campaign books, codices, army books, supplements. I collect them too, but today I want to talk about the rulebooks. Now, I do like a good rulebook. I love reading them. I read them from start to finish like I would any book, because I'm a massive nerd. And honestly, numbers kind of calm me down. I find numbers a very soothing thing. Now, looking at rulebooks, and I have a decent collection, and some of my favourite ones in my collection at the moment are the original Dystopian Wars rulebook when it was under Spartan Games, and Battlefleet Gothic. These are both fantastic rulebooks, and they're interesting and fun to use. Now, so what makes a good rulebook? Now, I am talking about the rulebooks themselves here, not the rule set. That's a completely different kettle of fish. A good rulebook, which would be fun and interesting to read, might have an appalling rule set in it. So I know you could feel good. Well, how would that be possible? Because of what's in the rulebook and the way it's laid out and the way you read it. You know, making a good book with a bad rule set better than a bad book with a good rule set. Okay. Now, I was thinking about how would you do this? Now, honestly, there's kind of two types of rulebooks as well. There is a core rulebook, this would to me, and an expanded rulebook. A core rulebook would be a rulebook, and that's it. That's basically it. It's just the rules, nothing else. And there are some really good ones. Now, a bad one, what I'm not a fan of, is the Kings of War 3rd edition, Gamer edition. That's what it's called. But a good one, which I like, is the 7th edition Warhammer 40k one. I happen to have both a limited edition and a normal one. Now, what makes the difference between these two is the size. See, a rulebook like this, to me, would have to be around about A5 size, because you want to take it about. You want to be able to put it in your bag or in your army case, and it not be a huge weight. And you can take it around, and it's a decent book to take around, and you can just grab the rules, and it's there, easy peasy, and you're done. And to me, that's what you really need to go about it. That's what, to me, makes a good core rulebook compared to a bad one, is literally the size. It needs to be small. It needs to be, easily fitted into a small bag, and that's it, okay? Now, for expanded rulebooks, that's completely different. Expanded rulebooks are, obviously, they're full of lore, they're full of information about your armies, photos, etc., as well as the rules. And if I'm honest, it's the lore and the information is why I buy these books. The rules are there, and I do like reading them, but it is the extras on top. And a good one, which I like, is the Wild West Exodus one, because that's a small skirmish game, and it does mean you have to go around it with it, and it's a small A5 size. A bad one, which in complete contrast to that, is 8th edition, the last Warhammer Fantasies rulebook. That is 500 pages, massive book. Rulebook, which means taking that thing around is a chore. And 500 pages, honestly, that's a bit much. But it's a decent rulebook. It's got plenty of lore, and it's got loads of timelines and everything else. But there is a couple of problems with that book, which I'll come to later. My favourite one is the Kings of War one. It has the rules, it has background, it has the army lists. It has backgrounds with the army lists. But the way it's laid out is so neat, so tidy. You have the rules, you have the campaigns, then you have the background. The background is laid out thusly. You have the overall background of Panafor, then you have the background of the good, the background of the neutral, and the background of the bad. So everything is very much laid out. And then the army lists at the back are laid out the same way. So the way you've got good, neutral, bad, and that's great because everything is laid out so you organized. Means if you're trying to find something, it's easy enough to find, which is fantastic, and that's what makes it so good. And they're all big pictures. And they're all pretty much got the same amount of space and time dedicated to each army. So if you play Abyssal Dwarves or Basilian, they're going to be able to find them easily, and you're going to have as much space taken over both of them. And when we talk about the law, it's how is the law set out and set up? To me, with a rule book, I don't really want to talk about individual characters. I don't think this is just my opinion. I don't want to talk about have full pages and pages about one character. I want to know about the entire faction that I want to get into. I want to know about that. I want to know, like, when I got into Wild West Exodus, it's always about the models first. But then I looked at, because I liked Orcs looking, and then I looked into their background, and that made it more interesting. But then I could read up on Orcs looking afterwards. And it was really their storyline and how they are, which really got me into them. Same with the Watchers as well. It wasn't the, Amber, Clay Jocasta, wasn't about her. It wasn't about the Magenta Alpha. To me, I wanted to learn about the Watchers, and again, the rulebook provided the information that covered it all up. So I know I know a lot of the information about the Watchers. And again, with Kings of War, we have this. We have lots and lots of lore about each faction, and it covers around the entire area of the faction, what they like, what they do, where they're from, and that's what makes it good. Whereas there have been some rulebooks where they will focus on a character. If you focus on a character in a rulebook, it can take a lot away from the faction that you want to play. Like, a good example would be let's say you'd want to do Orcs. Orcs are a very thematic army. I find most Orc players tend to be fun and interesting to play. There does tend to be a lot of fun guys and girls who play Orcs, and I think Orcs attract that kind of player, which is great. Where if they were to do Orcs, and instead of talking about the setting and what Orcs do and why they're so orky, and instead you had several pages dedicated to Ghazghkull Thraka, you're not going to learn much about the Orcs. You're going to learn a lot about a single character and how he is, but as for Orcs themselves, you're not going to learn much, and that would be a crying shame for the host army. And so a decent rulebook will, of course, cover the setting of each faction and how each faction works. And let's come to the photos now. Now, one thing I've learned in some rulebooks is that photos tend to be more dedicated to a faction, a single faction. You'll get, in some rulebooks, you'll get a faction where it's the big one, and that's the one they want you to, that's their big boys, that's their, and you'll see loads and loads of photos of them. And what I usually find more egregious is that not only do you have photos of them, but when it's a battle photo, when you've got two factions fighting each other, it's usually them and someone else. It's never two different factions. And that's probably worse. Where a decent rulebook will have lots of photos, all of, different factions, of all of them. And they'll, again, generally take up the same amount of space as each one. You may get one with slightly more than others, but it's not so much as in you will get like five photos of one army and then 15 of this other one, which again is absolutely egregious and doesn't really show off the armies and factions, which is what these books should be doing. They should be showing off what each faction is and what you can do with them. And now finally is the army list. So now I think all the best rulebooks, the only one that actually doesn't do this of my favourite rulebooks is the Wild West Exodus one. And that is army list. It has, I would say, a good rulebook has to have the army lists there. So it might not be as, in depth as a codex, but it's got the basics there. It's got exactly what you need to play the game. You've got, you've got your lords, heroes, troops, champions, etc., etc. You've got them all laid out. You've got the basic weapons and what they can do, and that's it. So you can play it. You don't have to have all the in-depth rules and everything else. Just the basic rules to get you playing the game. And again, my favourite one at this is Kings of War 3rd edition, because it has all of this. And it's laid out in such a way that it's easy to understand. If you were to look at the picture and go, hey, that's how it works. Now, if they don't do this and not having it free, again, is completely bad. I don't like that. If you're not going to have these basic principles or basic army list rules in your rulebook, in this day and age, you've got to make them free online. Warhammer 40k is doing this until the codex drops. I'm sorry, but that's the worst thing I've heard. And yeah, they're paywalling those index cards. The index cards were a great idea. I think they were fantastic. I think DEW did something great with them. But to say that, when the codex drops, they're no longer going to be viable, yeah, that's kind of a kick in the teeth. So having an army list in the rulebook is always a fantastic idea. And you know, like I said, it gets people playing the game, it gets people interested in the game. You can compare which armies you want to play against, and you're also prepared for anyone else as well. You can see, like, again, if you collect a Bizzle Dwarfs Romantic, or you know, Age of Sigmar doesn't do it either, as now I've just noted, but you do get the War Scrolls free, which is kind of good as well. So the fact in Age of Sigmar you get the War Scrolls free, but and the army build is free, so you can still do this. But it does mean you can get a good idea of what army you're going to be facing against, their strengths, their weaknesses, you know, and you can build, you know, plan accordingly to that army. Or you can also look at which army you like the best. Which stats do you tend to go with the most? Like I said many times, with me it's always speed. I always go for fast armies, so I tend to look at the movement because I like to go that one. And after that is how strong they are in close combat, because I usually end up there very quickly. Anyway, so that's my thoughts on what makes a good rulebook. As I said before, I've got plenty of rulebooks. I do actually have loads of them, and to me that's the way it goes. Like, basically, it's good to have a small section of rules. Rules got to be quite small. It's got to take up, I would say, no more than a third of the rulebook. Then you have the law. The law is probably going to have to take up quite a bit, to, you know, half at tops, and it's got to be the setting. It's got to be the law of each setting of the world, and then the setting of each faction and how they work. And then you have army lists, you know, maybe some special magic items, magic rules, and whatever on top. But that's all got to be in that section. So you can, you know, like I said, so you can play it straight away, and you're not too stressed, and you know that's how it works. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video on rulebooks and what I think makes a good one. And I'll speak to you all again soon. And yeah, link to Wayland Games is down below if you want to save money on your Warhammer. Hey, they have rulebooks there too. And so yeah, go and save some money on them. And after that, you have Forbidden Planet if you like comics. They have D&D rulebooks. And of course we have my comics, which are not rulebooks, and my merchandise, which is also not rulebooks, and Patreon. But as always, I love you guys. Make sure you just go out and treat yourself to something nice first. Don't just give me money. I'd rather you go out and treat yourself first, because then everyone wins. Bye bye.